I want to show you this real fast, and then I go back to the cause. I've said over and over again that our warfare is a warfare between good and evil. It really is a spiritual battle. And when you get to know yourself, you see that the battle between evil and good is happening within you. But if you return to the Father, good is defeating evil, right? Likewise, if you're of the Father, you can defeat evil outside as well, inside of others. And never before have I seen the evil, it just split down the middle now. It's so apparent, you have to not want to see it to not understand it. Back in June, we reported on an archbishop by the name of Carlos. I forgot, what's Carlos' last name, Nick? Vigano. Carlos Vigano. And his letter to the president, he wrote an amazing letter to the president, and we read it on the air here back in June, where he was describing the pandemic and the George Floyd protest as a biblical struggle between the children of the light and the children of darkness. This is so deep. So you can podcast the show to listen to that letter. Last Sunday, the same bishop addressed the Catholic Identity Conference in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And during his address, he made mention of the spiritual battle in America, that America is facing as it gets closer to the election. He kind of speaking a foreign language a little bit, so listen up closely. Watch this.
We live in extraordinary times. As each of us has probably understood, we find ourselves in a historical moment in time. Events of the past, which once seemed disconnected, prove now to be unequivocally connected, both in the principles that inspire them and in the goals they seek to achieve. For 60 years, we have witnessed the eclipse of the true church by an anti-church that has progressively appropriated her name. The anti-church has usurped her authority, and its ministers wear a sacred garment instead of questioning themselves and their faith. This elite bishop, theologian, intellectual, to the progressive wing of the council, and the traditional Catholic wing, there is a part of the episcopate, the clergy and the people, that attempts to keep equal distance from what it considers two extremes. I'm talking about the so-called conservatives, that is, a centristic part of the ecclesiastical body that ends up carrying water for the revolutionaries, because while rejecting their excesses, it shares the same principles. The bottom line of this conformity on the part of the anti-church with the dominant ideology of the modern world establishes a real cooperation with powerful representatives of the deep state. Allow me a brief word about the political situation in the United States on the eve of the presidential election. Fratelli Tutti seems to be a form of Vatican endorsement of the Democratic candidate in clear opposition to Donald Trump, and a few days after Francis refused to grant an audience to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Rome. This confirms which side the children of light are on and who the children of darkness are.
Amazing. So Nick is here, my producer, and he's gonna break it down what he said in English.
Right. It's he's got an accent, right? So
Right.
but it's deep what he's saying because, this is like coming on after everything that's happened since June, right? And back in June we talked about his letter, right?
Right.
He talked about Black Lives Matter and everything. And in this address to the Catholics, he's calling them out for their well, first he's talking about how there's an eclipse of morality in the church, right? And during this eclipse, he describes how the progressives, or what he calls the so-called conservatives. I'm wondering if he's watching your show. See, the so-called conservatives in the church in general, he compares them to the revolutionaries, right? And we think about the revolutionaries here in America, right? The radicals, the people out there on the streets, burning and making the businesses want to board up their place, right, in anticipation for the election. It's deep what he's saying because he says that while the so-called conservatives may condemn their excesses, the revolutionaries, they share the same values at the end of the day. He goes on to mention what he calls the deep church, and he compares the deep church to the deep state. These are terms we've heard before. It's kind of like an abbreviation. He uses the term the deep church to abbreviate a much bigger concept, which is the concept of a corrupt actors, people who act as Christians, people who act as conservatives, both in the government, the deep state, or in the church, the deep church. And he describes those corrupt actors as the vessels which are working against the true church, right? Compare that to today with the government, with what Trump is facing daily in the government, right? With conservatives, with his own people that he's appointed. He finally ends off his address. It's a long address; it's an hour long, but he towards the end of his address, he comments directly on the election that's coming up, right? And he says, he mentions that he delineates that it's clear who the children of light and who the children of dark are, right? He mentions that the Pope Francis denied audience with Mike Pompeo. He's referring to something that happened recently, but basically he's saying that the children of dark are clearly against Trump with the children of light.
And so he says something like even the Pope or whomever wear the robes and things, and conservative, they are supporting the radicals. Something like, what did he say about that?
He says about the church and the people that wear the sacred garments, that they're theologians, intellectuals, and priests, that instead of, he's talking about the eclipse of morality in the church and how it's falling apart. And he asks and he wonders about those theologians and intellectuals who wear the sacred garments, that instead of questioning their own faith, they go along with the revolutionaries.
Oh, okay. It's amazing. I wish it was clear from him, but the part I got was amazing.
Right.
Yeah. He's making a good point. And it's happening in other churches too, like Baptist churches, where a lot of churches are going along with the radicals, like Black Lives Matter and Antifa. They're not denouncing them. They're going along with it. Under this phony idea that George Floyd was somehow another victim and racism, police brutality. It's the same thing. The churches are not the same anymore.
Right.
And it is a split between good and evil now. The intellectual, I saw they had some little, it may have been on 60 Minutes last night. They were asking, I think it was 60 Minutes or maybe the show this morning. They were asking the voters out of Ohio who are they supporting, and they show a husband supporting Trump, an intellectual wife supporting Biden. I'm like, how is it that a wife going to follow somebody else instead of her husband?
Right.
But she's an educated woman, they said.
We talked about this a bit too. We were talking about suburban women and college-educated women increasingly voting against their husbands.
Yeah.
And for Biden, really.
Also, I heard a report that educated people tend to go for the Democrats now, whereas non-educated people tend to go for Trump.
Right.
So common sense versus indoctrination, that's what it is. Because a lot of these schools are indoctrinating these people. They don't realize that that's what's happening. Thank you, Nick.
Yeah, no problem.
I do appreciate it. And if you don't have faith in God and what is right, you have nothing. Really. You're lost. And to the millennials, when I was growing up, men and women, especially men and women really, but especially men, you dealt with stuff. You just dealt with it. You know, the world has changed so much. Y'all have no idea how much this world has changed, and it's gotten weaker. And I know it's because men have gotten weaker. But men, you got to endure something. How are you going to get strong if you don't endure? It's like lifting weights. How you get strong if you don't build your weights up? The more weight you put on, the stronger you become. All right? So endure. Take the pain. Don't care what anyone says or think. It's between you and what is right. It's the way you treat others, not the way they treat you. You treat others the way you would like to be treated. And it has nothing to do with the way they treat you. And I don't mean let people run over you, but don't hate them. Don't worry about what people think or what they say. And cause you're dealing with good and evil inside yourself and inside others, outside of you, inside others. The world is evil. It's of Satan. And Satan have a lot of representatives, a truckload of them. So you can't be concerned about that, all right? They have hate. They don't have love. They're not going to, if you're doing well in business, the average person is not going to say, wow, congratulations. Because they're of hate. They have a little envious. They're jealous. They want to stop you. But that's evil. And if you have faith, you'll overcome evil.
You know, you ever hear people say things like someone does something to them and it's like, oh, my day is ruined?
Yeah.
It's like the entire day? Well, what did you do? Like, what if it's at 9 o'clock in the morning?
I know.
Did you go home and go to sleep? You know, it's obviously people say that, and obviously it's an over-exaggeration.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's still like to even say, even the notion
But some
of that
people's
is silly.
entire day is ruined by one criticism.
Right.
I know there's a female family member, more than one, and some guys who in my family, if you have like real talk with them, they can't handle it. Like, I can't talk about this.
Right.
Because they feel the pressure coming on, right? And they don't even want to have the pressure upon them. I can't deal with this. I can't talk about this.
Right, right.
I'm like, what the? But you can handle anything, right?
Superman, baby. Oh, yeah.
Well indoors.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Overcompensating.
So do you treat the positive in the same way you do the negative?
Yeah, there's times where the negative can tempt you more than the positive. And there's times where the positive can slip in to make you feel good about it. Like, oh, she's right or he's right. I am this or that. So there's times where it can slip in, but overall, I believe I'm centered in enduring in general, or just sticking with what I know is right.
I've never seen a society where the inner nature is so weak.
Yeah.
Things have changed so much, I can hardly remember what America was like when I was growing up. It had changed so drastic. Society is so evil now because it's so weak. I know how it got weak too, but I can't say it. I won't say it now. But society is so weak, but it's so evil. It's just evil. I never imagined America becoming this way. But it's gonna change because men and women are waking up, and they're waking up to good because they knowing thyself. They're knowing themselves.